Um, so I think so. Officially, science would have started in Mesopotamia and the Egyptians, and that was around 3000 to 1200 BC. But in my opinion, I feel that science, that really science, modern science, started in Greece with the ancient philosophers such as Pythagoras, Aristotle, and Plato, because they were the really ones who went and they really investigated the meanings of the universe. Like they didn't just rely on religion to decide how everything worked. They went and they just started looking at the world around them and trying to find physical explanations for everything.
In that regard, I'd say like mythology is kind of like science in a sense, because science is trying to explain things, right? So a lot of earlier civilizations used mythology to explain things, attributing thunder, lightning, any sort of earthly phenomenon to a god, a higher power. So you could technically, using that definition, argue that mythology is or was once considered science.
Well, when I said science, I meant modern science, such as chemistry, physics, not mythology, because mythology is no longer science. So I was talking about modern science. Mythology, of course, you could classify it as life science, but then it would have started from the beginnings of time when humanity started, making deities and stuff like that. So that what I'm talking about is modern science, looking around you, thinking, why does this happen, not attributing it to mythology.
But wouldn't looking around and trying to figure out what it is and then attributing it to some sort of higher power technically count as science? Because if we're starting from the idea that science is trying to explain things, then, mythology would be considered science. And modern science just is a thing that's trying to explain things. Now we have the information that we have, but again, you could still consider it to be some sort of higher power.
When I'm saying science, it's not just specifically looking around and finding explanations. It's deeper than that. It has to be an explanation that doesn't attribute it or create something in its favor. It needs to be something that's based on evidence, factual evidence. If there is no factual evidence, then it could be classified as it could most likely it would fall down to mythology. It needs to have factual evidence, actual results. Because if Newton just said that gravity existed, but nobody had ever seen an apple fall from a tree or anything fall to ground, then they would not believe him. It would probably be classified under almost something like mythology. So it has to be factual, tangible evidence
But
that it
wasn't
works.
Newton was and believed when he first introduced the idea of gravity, even though people had already known what it was, that things fell down and things happened. They just didn't have a name for it. And when Newton decided to come up with the theory of gravity, not many people believed him.
Well, then you could also argue that for mythology, when somebody comes up with a new religion, people don't start running and flocking to join the religion. And that point doesn't really prove anything wrong.
Exactly. People need convincing to join
Yes,
any sort of religion or anything. That
but the,
includes science.
but the thing is, science is factual evidence, like I said. So your point doesn't really disprove mine. Because if science is factual evidence, then anything, it has to have factual evidence to be science. And religion does not count because you don't have tangible factual evidence. So the religion isn't science. Mythology isn't science. It's mythology.
I
Yeah,
strongly
that
support Aiden's point because how can you say the myth is a science?
It depends on
but
the idea of science that you're using. If you're just saying science is the idea to explain things, then yes, mythology could be classified as science.
But
So you have a
science is
logical
logical,
fallacy
has
in
true
your
evidence.
explanation of science.
Okay, take it like this. What I just said was that science is factual evidence. I'm not saying that it's just looking around you. That's a very broad explanation. And yes, if you would look at that broad explanation, religion would work, but that's not the full explanation of science. Explanation of science would mean it would have to have factual and tangible evidence that it would work. Like, for example, theories. You can't just put out a theory saying that objects come to Earth because they like Earth. If you put that out, sure, there is tangible evidence for it, but is it the only possible way for it to work? And are there any other factors? That's basically what mythology is. It's an explanation made to tailor to your views, because you cannot find anything else, or you don't want to find anything else. That's when you start talking about mythology, when you don't know. So science is knowledge. That's knowledge and looking around you and figuring out tangible evidence that would support your idea.
So basically, mythology is something that you use to explain things, and so is science. You use it to explain things, but the difference between them is that science, we know it already. We know it based on facts and evidence and experiments and observations. So mythology, it's a myth. It's not true. We don't know if it's correct, unlike science.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
And also, like in mythology, we can't question it. Like if says like, yeah, if you pray to God and God will fulfill you some wishes, we can't question it. If you question it, they will relate to death. Like if you question God, you will die. Like, and it stops you from questioning. But science, actually, we can question it and we can make it false. So that's the major difference between mythology and science, I think. So. But now
I'm saying this as a non-religious person. You can definitely question religion.
right now, science is like mythology right now, because teacher is telling us some stuff, science stuff. We are just believing it, and we are just taking in. We are not questioning it, or we are not. But why is it true, or why it happens? We are not asking any questions. So right now, science is acting like mythology. So we need to change it. So that's why in previous sessions you said that 5 questions of questions of science, and you need to ask questions and make science false. So that questioning is needed for science to be complete, or like real science. So right now we are doing a mythology version of science, like saying and believing.
What I agree with the fact that science is different than religion because you can question it, but I don't agree with how you're saying that science is mythology right now. The ideas that we are not questioning, is the reason why we're not questioning them is because they've been questioned for hundreds of years, and nobody has come up with something that disproves them, that is logical. That's the reason we're not questioning it. But for example, when
people say that science, like the things that you learn from science, is supposed to be able to be questioned.
Yes.
So are you saying that isn't science?
You should still question it, and you could still prove it wrong.
What I'm trying to say is you didn't let me finish my sentence. What I'm trying to say is the theories like gravity, we don't question gravity because it's been proved so many times over and over, and it fits into the other theories. It fits like a jigsaw puzzle. It works. But if a medical study comes out saying that this drug will cure cancer, you don't go and say, okay, I totally believe this, let's go start putting it in every patient. No, you try and you look for logical evidence against it. You question it to see whether it's really what it's branded as.
Like
yeah, like you told now, like the science really originated from Greek period, but you can't ignore the fact that during the Egyptian and Mesopotamian region, like calendars came up, binary decimal system, and many stuffs were built, like pyramids also. They were also the applications of science now. So there are also before Greek period, there are also evidences that science originated before. So I think we cannot say that science originated from a single place or something. It's a series of events like which pave the way to the modern science. So that's my point.
Also,
Yeah,
you said that
I understand that, but a lot of that is also mathematics. Science and mathematics, even though science uses mathematics, they're still not the same thing. The pyramids were made using geometry. And the ancient Greeks, they were interested in mathematics. In fact, the whole world was looking at mathematics before they were looking at science. So science itself, chemistry, biology, physics would be one of the earliest ones, including biology. Those really originated in ancient Greece, in my opinion, because philosophy was science at that time. In fact, PhD means you're a doctor in philosophy. That's what it stands for. So I feel that modern science, in the science sense, originated in ancient Greece.
Yeah,
okay,
but
but
you
one
also
thing I
told
have to
like
say,
science also
it's
need
fine, go ahead.
explanation, but many in ancient Greece also there are many things that the philosophers couldn't give an certain explanation. So even though they started, but I think the explanations came too late. So could you you also told now like science need to be the facts, it's already proven. So could you possibly say that it started from ancient Greek, or could it be later?
I feel like the real start of delving deep into the questions, the people who came up with the significant questions, that branch started with ancient Greece. Like Aristotle, he was wrong about the elements, but he started thinking about earth, air, water, and fire. The Egyptians and the Mesopotamians didn't start thinking about the building blocks of modern life. They didn't start thinking about chemistry. They were more thinking, if I put so and so amount of water into this bucket, will it lift the other side of this beam? They were thinking of a more
They were thinking of more practical applications.
Yes, and when for example Newton's law of gravity, it's great, but it's not precisely practical in a sense. It won't tell you how to get unlimited energy. It will tell you the rules that you can play by, but it's not going to give you anything in the board game of science.
Yeah, but there's also a fact that mythology paved the way to science. Like, if people did not start believing in that, so it is also one of the reasons, like, why science originated. Like, what do you say? In the early periods, like, people questioned mythology in a way that led to the foundation of science. So, in a way, like, mythology is also, I think, a part of science. Like, people started questioning it, and the answers came out through various like philosophical way, I think. So that's one.
I won't deny that philosophy did start science. That is true. It what played a major role. But I do not think that mythology is science because it's not tangible. It actually really has nothing going for it other say, okay, say I wanted to make something look the way I wanted it to. So for example, the fuel station, the thing that you put in your car, it's not fitting, okay? It's not working. So what I can do is I can blame it on the guy. I can say he's not putting it in correctly. In a way, that's why religion is different than science. It's created an explanation that may or may not be true, But science looks and looks until it finds a tangible solution to something. If you can't find evidence that that thing exists, then it doesn't become a theory. However, with religion, you can create a story to match what you want it to match.
But listen, wouldn't you say that mythology would be the start to science?
Yeah, that's
It's
what I'm
because
saying.
people
Like the
looked
questioning
for
started.
a reason.
It's
Yeah,
human
mythology
nature to
started
observe
science.
things and try to figure out explanation for things. But so it did kind of pave the way, because earlier
Because they
on we
wanted an
were using
explanation, they
mythology
decided to
to
question those explanations. You could say that it
exactly.
started science.
It's not part of science, because science, I keep
We're
saying,
not saying it's part of science. We're saying it started science.
It originated, where the science originated. So I think that's the answer of the question.
well, you could, well, if you're
Mythology
saying,
got us questioning these kinds of things. Mythology got us like questioning how this happens, or like trying to figure out how these things happen. So
yeah, I understand that, but if the point is that mythology was the first part that originated, that made science what it is now, like it started with mythology, no, I don't think so, because the people who really became scientists were the people who didn't talk,
Who questioned mythology.
yes, who questioned mythology, but just because it played a role in science starting doesn't mean it was where science started. Science started the day somebody started questioning mythology, and that's different.
Exactly. It was the
so
catalyst.
mythology does play a
science.
part in it.
Yeah, I understand mythology is
It's
the catalyst.
the catalyst. That's where it originates.
It is, but just
People
because
questioning mythology.
yes, but just because it's the catalyst that started the chain reaction, it doesn't mean that that it originated from the catalyst. It originated from the disagreeal towards the catalyst. It's not when the catalyst started it. It's not the catalyst itself. It's not when the catalyst was made. It was when somebody started disagreeing with mythology.
But wouldn't you say that the catalyst is important in this case? Because if the catalyst never existed, then the entire chain reaction wouldn't have happened.
But now you're going off the point, because that's not the point. I did say that mythology was important to science, but what I argued was that it's not what started science. Science didn't start with mythology.
So
But
it started by people
again,
questioning
mythology
mythology.
is what
Wouldn't that
kickstarted the reaction of science.
If you don't question anything, how will you know?
There had to be something that had to be questioned. That was mythology.
So in mythology, people made up these myths to explain things because they were questioning these things. And then once it became more modern, people started questioning those things.
Yes, that is what happened, but the question was, where did science originate? And if we're thinking that science originated where mythology originated, I don't think so. I think science originated
from myths.
Yeah, no.
It does originate from myths. You're thinking of it from the modern physics, chemistry, biology standpoint. I'm thinking of science in general. Science started when people started questioning how things happened. They used mythology as the answer. But then people started questioning that mythology.
The question was
And
not
that's how
where,
we got our modern.
The question wasn't from what did science originate. The question was, where did it originate? So sure,
but where doesn't have to be a place.
No, where has
where
to
doesn't
be
inherently mean a place. It can just mean like what exactly started.
No,
science.
then it would be what? Then what did science originate from? It's where. Where is a place, not a thing.
Myths can be originated from any place now. So
then to be logical, you could say Greece.
Yeah, that's what my argument is. But it could also just as well be somewhere else. It's where somebody who disagreed with religion got up and started speaking out and giving different theories. That's where science originated, wherever that place is. And the most famous examples of that are in Greece.
True.
Guys, excuse me, just a second. Okay, it's going really well, but I want the others also to speak up. I guess Neil, you're a really good speaker. Why are you being there? Come on, spill it out.
I just want to hear what all they're saying. It's new information for me. I just like to hear it.
Yeah, but I guess Marvel, you came as prepared, right? Just spill your thoughts out. Yes, Hrishikesh is there. Atmika, Nivedita, come on.
I just had one thing to say. Wherever they started the question is the place where science originated. Where they asked a question and they found an answer is the place where science just started. But we don't know where. Why? Because people who started that can failed, and no one has been maybe like took that seriously. So their theory or anything can be wrong and they will be failed. But mostly Greek has been like most popular in that, and maybe because of that they're known for that. They are the originated, but it can be anywhere, not to here.
Money can't bring you happiness, but it can bring you documentation. And that's what Greece did. Documented literally everything they had.
Yes, and documentation is a major part of science. If you don't document your findings, nobody will take you seriously. If you just say, oh, I saw this happen. No, you have to write it down. You have to take photos. You have to give evidence. And that's what the Greeks did. They were the origination of science. They were the ones who really followed the scientific method. They wrote it down. They had scholars, they had philosophers, and their philosophers were respected. So in a sense, at that time, philosophy was science, because science wouldn't just be about the physical world. It could also be sometimes be about the theoretical world, and that's what the philosophers inherently did.
But also, Egyptians, didn't they also write things down? They also documented their findings, maybe just not as comprehensively as Greek people did.
Yeah,
but they did have.
But what the findings weren't specifically about science, were they? That's the problem. Sure, then the Mesopotamians invented writing. Did they invent science? No. They documented, sure, this was the trade that I had. It resulted in this. I paid this man so and so, and I received this in return. But that's not science, is it? That's what the Egyptians were doing. They were looking for a practical way to just reduce work. Because at that time, that was a really big thing in that era. You would need to reduce work. Now, whether that uses concepts from physics, you didn't go for the point of finding solutions. You went so you could figure something out. And that wasn't really physics or any part of science, because you didn't document why.
It has isn't the documentation of applications.
So just I'm intervening. I'm intervening. So to ensure that it doesn't become a conversation between two people and to give fair chance to others. So what we can do is, Ethan, Amina, can you just can we just have the others also to express their views? Can we leave some time for them? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So I appreciate your interest and enthusiasm. I wish we can continue for a longer time, but then there are time limits. So probably, like Sri Lakshmi told, if others also can express their opinions in next 10 minutes, then we can get to the next part.
According to me, I think that science was not originated from special group of people, like saying from Greeks or from Mesopotamians or anyone like that, but simply by early men. For example, early men have already known that where sun rises, where sun sets, and all those things. They are just even though they were not going into deep scientific experiments, but they were into somewhat like a science. They know that which plants give us fruits which we can eat. They already know that they found that which plants are poisonous to us. So such kind of classifications, even though they were not much scientific, they made them. So I don't think that it was just by a special group of people, but by just early men.
I also think that science didn't originate. It existed from the starting onwards. The humans only discovered it after some years. And it caused the discovery of science.
I think that science did originate. Like it was not in universe. Like things were happening in universe, but science was not. So science was just a way for explaining how those things in our universe happened. Okay. So things like the seed growing to tree, or earth revolving around the sun, was everything happened from the second universe started. But science originated after humans and or evolved into civilization. Science is just the way to explain things. Okay. So I think that science did originate, but I don't have a solid proof like where did it originate.
So I agree. Science is something that is used to explain things, and you already have knowledge of those things. But where do we get that knowledge from? Where does that science originate from? Is from questions. So long time ago, they started asking these kinds of questions. Where does this come from and all? That led to scientific proof that people started finding out, leading to science. So the whole thing is considered science. Asking questions, researching about that, asking, getting evidence. So it can start anywhere. I don't think it originated in one place.
Science also can be originated long ago. Like when the creation of fire, they'll be maybe asking, how does this glowy substance make heat? So it must be there also. Like they might be questioning, wow, it's so hot. How it produce hot? How does it produce light? Only we see light at sun at that time, like when they created fire. So heat, light. So they'll be questioning this. It can be also originated at that time. Or maybe dinosaurs, they have brains, right? They can also think, why is the sun giving us light and heat? So it can start anywhere, anytime. When a living creature, any living organism can think of something like that. So who anything, any creature or any organism which thought of that might be where it originated, or already any creature has been found. It's not only depends on humans, it can be dinosaurs also. They can think, right? Or maybe humans also, or any other, anything which has brains to think of it.
So just like Neil said, dinosaur. So every animal can think. Also, like example, even before humans were discovered, there were like dinosaurs. All so so like dinosaurs or other all living organisms before humans were originated. They might have lived, and they might have thought why it have happened, why is it happening like that, what is it, but we don't know yet. They may or may not know, have asked it themselves. So they may, I'm repeating one thing again, so sorry, but dinosaurs or any other living organism before us may have thought why sun is shining, why a plant is growing, how is a plant making its food. So uh, organisms before us have brains, so they were able to think, and they were just as smart as, they may have been smart as us, us, so they can, and have experimented. We don't know that all, but they may have experiment or may have known it even before we had. but we don't know the proof of it. That's all.
Yeah, that can be true also. Like if humans were there in that time, and like if the sun was the only resource of light, they'll be like, okay, only the sun might be. So what if I go under a cave? Does it mean that the only object which gives light is sun? It can be like only this thing gives us light. Is that how? So they'll be like experiment me. Maybe that time they would know, maybe like that, or maybe after some time they got eaten and then no one knows the evidence of that. Like that, it can be happen. Can happen like that also.
Yes. So like sun, anything can happen when like millions or billions years ago. We may even before the humans fire. When humans were there, they knew fire was there, but like we have proof, but we don't have that proof like 100% correctly. Our proof is like 50 or 80% may have been correct, but not everything has 100% of proof.
So, like animals are thinking, and that doesn't mean that science is going in their head. Like yeah, they're just questioning, and that's just a part of science. But science actually, I said like explaining things with a lot of mathematical equation that supports that, and all evidence that puts up, and it's a way of explaining. So yeah, animals do think, but I don't think like they are capable of like higher level reasoning, just like our human brains do, because they are just created in that way, and we are created to think, to questioning, and to reason that reasonings. So I think that humans have that ability, like
Yeah, that can be true. So like even we started this as it appeared where Greek or anywhere, people before there also have could use knowledge logics to think of any possibilities, like, oh, this is like that, and they can question, they can use logics and little mathematics, like, oh, this is so much length, then they can question by using little logics and find out an answer. That is also possible. So that can also be a little science inside that. So it can not only be in uh, this time period, like when the Greek, in the Greek only it can be, even before, with a little logic and with some teamwork, many logics can create and little answers for science. So that's also possible.
Yeah, so you are technically saying that science did not originate from the point where you're saying, like, we thought of it or the dinosaurs thought of it. So I personally think that it did not originate while we were there. I think it originated at the origin, like when time started, when the universe started. So, and we just discovered it and developed it, and we called it science. Don't think that should be like more of a.
But science did not start when the universe started. Science may have started even before universe or universe has begun. We don't know that. It may have
That
started
is true.
even. Yeah, you can say.
Science, as we know this, we have to question and ask, what is this, how is this happening? So if you take the time when time started, or like the Big Bang started, the universe, there's everything, right? You know, how does the sun produce light and heat? That is all known. So yeah, it can be from when the formation, Big Bang, it can start from there. It's like questioning and answering, right? You have to know how, when, and that all. So at the universe, you know all the information, the star. If you look deeper and deeper and use some law, there is no brain, okay? In that time there's no living creature, but by if anyone was there in that time also, if any creature with brains were there, they will also know that anything. They can think of that, and if you go at that time also, you'll know that the sun, if you just imagine, and you can do that. So it can happen anytime, anywhere, I think.
If I may say something, I think science, the definition is a study, and there can't be any studies if humans or anything without brains were there. So it can start before the universe, and it can start at the Big Bang, I think.
Yeah, guys.
I don't think this is.
Yeah, I totally understand that you guys are really into it and I'm really enjoying it than before. It's really good, but time is very important, right? So all of you did a very good job. This is really interesting. It was really fun. And I got to know a lot about it. Thank you.
Okay, good. So the thing is, yeah, now you might be appreciating why we took those two first session. What was our first topic? First day topic?
Do ghosts
exist?
Yeah, but with that, what did we convey? With that, what did we convey? What did I present?
We don't know.
So when I presented that day, what were the topics? Where did it come to?
What are inducive reasoning?
Scientific for reasoning.
Exactly. What is science? Then we talked what is science and what is not science. So that is why I took that to tell that what is science. And then what was our second day's topic?
How did the universe?
Exactly. So that was about the origin and end of the universe. So that is to differentiate science from the universe. Okay. So I'll quickly run through few points. All of you have had great points. And there is this is not a question where somebody can tell, oh, this is the exact answer. This is not like how many sides a triangle has. This is not a question like that. Whether 5 is bigger or 4 is bigger. This is not a question like that. So this can have intertwined answers. I will put few points and after that you can think whether it adds some value to you, whether there is some change in your thought processes, but all of you have done great. Okay, can we start? Okay, quickly. So this is where I think a lot of things originated from.
The first cave where humans came from.
Exactly. Okay, so that is called Cradle of Humankind in South Africa, and there are few caves like this where from Nivedita's grandparents were sitting here, and Labanos here, Atmika's here, and Saira's here. Yeah, all from same cave. You might be having, somebody will be having a specs today, somebody may be looking white, and somebody might be having a t-shirt, but all your grandparents came from same cave. That is bottom line. Point number 1. Maybe different caves in Ethiopia, in Africa, different parts of Africa, right? So that's where it started. But that doesn't mean that's when humans started. That's what many people do mistake. So this is the journey, which is the latest information which we have of the human race, which started approximately 70,000 plus years before. But that doesn't mean human beings were not there before. We have skeletons of human beings from 200,000 years before, but they didn't live, they didn't sustain. So it is those people who started 70,000 years back from here, and crossing this stream was a big problem for them. And you might be knowing the climate science. Every 15,000 years, the hot, the warm and cold climates, the cycles, it repeats. So during the cold cycles, it is pretty difficult for them to travel. Or those who ventured out during hot cycles, they perished during the cold cycles. They don't have food. But those people who started 70,000 years back, they could come through this route, they could cross this place and settle someplace here, then cross from here and come through India, and you can see this route. And this, you have now, there are websites where you can go and check your ancestry, where your parents, your father's ancestry came from, where your mother's genomic came from. There are sites today there are paid services today. It can tell your lineage, your father's lineage, your mother's lineage, mother's mother, where from they started. All points to Africa. And that is the inquisitiveness of the species. And we were not alone here. Till 30,000, 35,000 years before, we had some cousins of us, as brilliant as us, along with us. Who are they?
Homo sapiens.
Neanderthals. Abhinav, we are Homo sapiens. We had Neanderthals.
Sorry.
Yeah, we had Neanderthals. We had Denisovans. And now people are talking about some more new species who are there very close in many of these places. But somehow your grandparents and my grandparents maybe fought with them or they survived. So we were not the only brainy animals around. And we don't know whether we are the only brainy animals because we are talking only about the Earth here. Earth is only a very tiny part of the universe. And then, people started, they were doing hunting. So they were called hunter-gatherers. And they started agriculture, which made a huge change. Because once you have the food, you can look at other things, art, entertainment activities, social life. And that is for the last 6,000 years or so, where people started thinking about other things. And these are a few places where those initial civilizations, many of you told many of these names till now. So 6 major civilizational areas are these 6. Yeah, it's not that no other places, nothing else happened, but the major civilization areas where people started making inventions, started asking these questions. Why is this happening? Like all of you told, why is sun coming from here? Why is the star blinking? Why is rain coming at this place? Purely for them to live better, purely for them to do agriculture, purely for them to have a good social life, for things like that. And approximate timelines, you can just read through. Approximate timelines. Minus 3,500 is 3,500 BCE. So maybe Mesopotamians, one of the first guys. And see, most interestingly, this is what you should see. You don't see America here. You don't see Germany here. You don't see France here. So-called big guns, you don't see here. You don't see UK here. Right? You see Egypt. You see Iraq. You see India. You see China. You see Mexico. Right? You see Chile. You see Peru. Oh, Russia. Yeah, you don't see in this civilizational stuff, you don't see them here. But you don't see the big guys who are big today. So those who pretend like they are everything of the world today, they are not there here. Interesting points. Okay. Yeah. So now, then many of you told, like after these initial civilizations, many of people told about Greek civilization. Yes, obviously, they did a great job. After, say, the AD or the late BC, the 3rd or 4th century BC onwards, yes, Greek did a lot. But before Greeks, these are people all contributed heavily to science. Heavily to science. But many of them were not knowing that is science. They did it because they needed it for living. Things like compass, things like calendars, things like astrolabe, all were like there during these periods. Okay. And then came Greek civilization, which you can probably tell one of the most modern scientific civilization who sort of like gave fundamentals to many things. This is a painting which is only a representation, but you can see the major scientists here. Some of the people whom I wrote here, you can just take 30 seconds off and read through all these important names, important scientists. Very, very important. Not that others are not important. So the difference here is we still use Euclid's geometry. We still use Archimedes' principle. Still the science. So whatever they found out, that was even modern science. We still use Galen's anatomy. We still, our doctors still take oath in the name of Hippocrates. Yeah, and the Pliny the Elder and Pliny the Junior, both, they are supposed to be father of botany and zoology. And then I'm talking about some regions who did a lot of contribution to science. Our country, you can just go through all these names. Some of these, couple of these names, 3 of these names are actually even BC. Sushruta, Kanada, and all are BC actually. BC, 6th century, 5th century, but we don't know the exact timelines. But others, Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, Varahamihra, and all are AD, 4th century, 5th century kind of. And Bhaskara, there are 2 Bhaskaras. So we still use their science. Say Aryabhatta, he started the sine and cos, which you study trigonometry, came from him. The number system which you use today, which we call as Indo-Arabic numerals, came from these 2 guys. It is the Brahmagupta's book which got translated to Arabic and then to Latin. Yep. And this guy called Madhava, there's a big debate going on in the scientific circles that is he the guy who should be credited for calculus? Okay. And then this is a big myth which many people don't talk about when they talk about science, the contribution of Arabs. Probably, if they would have continued for maybe a couple of more centuries, the Abbasid Caliphate, if they would not have been attacked by Genghis Khan and his team, if they would have continued for maybe a couple of more centuries, whatever we call as Americas and Europe would have happened in Iraq, Syria, and all. People think that they are some third world countries. They are not. They are the people who started first government-sponsored research and first modern university in Cairo. And this is a time when, Islam is going through a lot of bad press. You should understand this is what their prophet taught. Yeah. So they give so much of importance to knowledge. And almost all science which we learn today, almost all the science which we learn today, after the Greek, it all is known to these people, but people conveniently forget this. Father of algebra, Al-Khwarizmi, father of optics, Al-Hazen, father of alchemy, in Hayam. And this is Al-Kashi is the guy who found out, he did a planetary computer at that time, analogous computer. Ibn Sina is a huge name in the field of medicine. And like those who have attended my other science course, we used to go through the inventions of all these people. And see the last 2. Copernicus used the astronomical tables of Al-Badani. That means they came so close. They came so close to what we call a heliocentric universe and what further Galileo, Copernicus and all did. But then political stability is important. They were attacked by the Mongolians. They couldn't continue. And then after that, obviously, the European Renaissance. I would leave the stage to you. Anyone wants to talk about European Renaissance? Add some points. What's its contribution to science?
And one of the people who is very important in the Renaissance was Antoine Lavoisier. He was the father of modern chemistry. He's also known as the father of modern chemistry. And there were a lot of great thinkers, even in the Enlightenment, that really changed science forever with their findings.
Anyone else wants to add anything?
Yes. When the European Renaissance started, maybe slowly people started to discover and invent new things. So for example, formerly, many of them believed that the earth was the center of the universe. But in the Renaissance period, this belief was proven false. Copernicus propounded the theory of the solar system and announced that the earth revolves around the sun. Later, Galileo Galilei modify the telescope, and using it, he scientifically proved that the theory put forward by the Copernicus was true. And it became easier to propagate the Renaissance ideas widely among the masses within the invention of the printing press by the Johannes Gutenberg. Thank you.
I think it's the reformation of science, because refined science. It was started in Italy and spread out all European countries.
Okay, good. So, Anika, you have something to talk why Renaissance becomes important in this science scheme?
Renaissance was a period where things started to grow more and things started to develop more, meaning like more inventions were created.
Okay.
So that used science.
Okay. Tushar, Amina, Tarun.
In the period of Renaissance, people started asking questions, like questioning why this, why that. So they were reasoning everything, and their fear to this region and regional problems were decreased. They but even the question, they were feared of this, the action taken by church, or like Galileo was in the jail for telling that I didn't remember it correctly, but a lot of people were feared of this church. And
in the
Okay.
Renaissance period, they gave great importance to human and his life.
It was a literal renaissance, a rebirth, but it was still restrained by the church and religious ideas.
Great points. So the point is, one thing we have to realize is that, see, Renaissance is actually not a science movement. But what Renaissance did is, till then, it is all about the king, the myths, the god, the religion. So the Renaissance changed that. Even the paintings till that time, people used to do either landscape, or they used to draw the portraits of the kings or mythical figures. And it is during the Renaissance time, people like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Raphael kind of people, they started drawing humans. That is the time Petrarch, a very famous literary personality, they all started talking about human beings. And they put human in the front by telling, hey, it is this man who is important. This whole world, it is human who is more important. So this changed the pecking order. The pecking order was, it is the king who is more important. It's everybody should live for the king. And after the king, it is king's son, prince or princess is the next one. All of us are immortal beings living for the king. They changed it by telling that it is the humans which is more important. It is the democracy which is more important. And the king should serve humans rather than the reverse. So this, you should understand, that has a huge impact in science. And that is when people started questioning. Of course, people used to question before also, but this is the time people started changing the way in which they look at it. That's from where the concept called the Renaissance man comes in. Leonardo da Vinci's Renaissance man. So actually the modern educational system what we have is to mold kids as polymaths. So you might have gone through the theory of multiple intelligence, which in many other GrainEd courses they cover, the different intelligences. So the education system which you have is actually supposed to prune you, improve you in all these multiple intelligences, which like Tarun says, unfortunately, it doesn't happen like that in the schools. They give more priority to only some theoretical, some specific part. But then this is where Da Vinci came, and then he mixed art with science, to philosophy, to literature. So it's like a human is supposed to be an embodiment of all those things. And from there came the scientific revolution. that is the time when all these scientists came in. Like Atmika told Gutenberg, see, the printing press is a huge stuff. Till then, you have knowledge, it is with you. Whomever you talk to, they get some knowledge. Printing press comes, you print it, and everyone has the knowledge. So many people who are proponents of knowledge. That makes a huge difference. And then all these scientists, Copernicus, who actually used, like we told, Albert and his tables and proposed the heliocentric theory. Francis Bacon, who developed this inductive and deductive methods, whatever we talking about the other day, he suggested, he was one of the first guys who proposed this inductive methods. And Galileo, no need to talk. Johannes Kepler, I hope you know. René Descartes, the French philosopher and mathematician and scientist. He's the guy who suggested whatever we use as Cartesian coordinates, like in graph X and Y. He's the guy, and many other things with him. And then few more names, very important people. Isaac Newton, you know. Leibniz, supposed to be the founder of calculus. He and Newton. And Robert Boyle is the guy who had this famous physics theory of pressure and volume. PV is a constant. Huygens founded that waveform of light. Pierre de Fermat, the mathematician, Fermat theorem. Many people like that. So then from this place, then you have the Maxwells and Faradays and Einsteins and all in 19th and 20th century. So that's a very brief history. I stop at that point. This is the topic for Wednesday.
In the Renaissance, they gave so much attention to the king that a meter or a foot was, for example, the length of the king's elbow to the tip of his fingers. So that was the units of measurement. That's how much attention they gave to the kings.
Do you mean a cubit? No, that was just a general form of measurement. They measured the king's feet.
No.
And it changed so often that they ended up standardizing it to around 12 inches, which is the current measurement of feet.
The cubit was invented in Egypt. What I'm talking about is they used to base measurements on the king's body parts.
Yes, the foot.
I don't think it was only the foot. I think there were some other units of measurement too.
Like?
Well, I think they were basing something like a meter, like a yard. Of course, they had different names at that time, but I know that they would base different units of measurement, such as meters or inches, on the king's body parts. For example, the length from his elbow to the tip of his fingers would be a unit of measurement at that time.
Where do you think science originated, sir?
See, I am like this referee in football match. So I have this whistle.
But referee also runs with the players, so you have to also say something.
So according to me, that it is not one specific place, or it is not one specific person. It is a series of events. So the kind of mistake which we do is like people tell, oh, Newton was sitting, apple came on his head and he founded gravity. It's absolute nonsense. So none of these things are founded by one people. Even relativity, you had Lorentz equations. Before that, you had Huygens, you suggested waveform. Before that, you had Maxwell. So you have so many things which goes on before, and it ends up in one person who makes an additional contribution and makes it as a theory. So it is not like one person alone develops something or one country alone develops something. It's a series of events which happens in many places which contributes together. Okay. But then one thing you have to understand, what you think as a minuscule information today would have been very difficult to derive. Because something like Earth is not flat. For you, it looks like a very simple information. But that's not a very simple information, Or like the Earth is rotating around Sun. the people have sacrificed their lives to prove such things. Just to prove that, see, you just think about it. What does a scientist has to do whether Earth is rotating like this or Sun is rotating like this? But they were ready to sacrifice their life to prove a scientific principle. So what looks very simple today would not have been that simple decades back, centuries back, millennia back. Because that time their priority was different. The first priority of any species is to sustain, is to ensure that it does reproduce, to ensure that it protects its offspring. That is the first priority of any species. You see. So after that only all other things come in. You understand? So that's why I tell you, agriculture is so important, because once you have food security, people can think about other things. How things happen. Till then, you don't have food security. You are thinking, will I survive tomorrow? You see the dogs, stray dogs in your backyard, or the cats in your backyard. They are thinking, where will I eat tomorrow morning? You know, they're on the constant run. You are able to come to Zoom class, you are able to go to movies because you know your kitchen is full. Yeah. So that makes a huge difference. So don't think that the mindset in which you are in would be the mindset of people 3,000 or 4,000 years back. So even their contribution, which you might be thinking it is simple, is significant. So it's a series of people in a series of places which contributed to what we call as modern science. Modern science. Okay. And I don't want to get dragged onto your discussion between mythology and science because it's a very controversial topic. I would leave it to you. You fight it out.